So we have so talks are gonna start, in 10 minutes again, right? And there's gonna be a workshop run by Hester on UX design in that room. And, soon after, the main council of magicians will start here as well, right? And we have 10 minutes left, but I'd love to actually, get everyone here for a photo, right? Lined up over there. So it'll be awesome. We can just spend the last 10 minutes trying to sheep each other over there where I'm pointing at. Yeah, so that'd be cool. Let's go. Move. No, we're taking a photo. Oh, that's your fault. Photo. Chop, come on, let's get up. Get up, come on. Photo. Hey folks. Photo. Hey, photo. Photo, yeah. We're doing a photo. Photo. Aiden, Musnit, photo. Just go. Photo. Yeah.
Wait, so
Hey, Megan, guys, you want to go to there for a photo, now?
Oh yeah. Sure.
Yeah, ASAP, yeah. Liam, you guys want to go? Okay. You folks want to go there for a photo? Yeah. Come on, chop. Magic, what the fuck? Just go. Stop arguing. Cool. Let's talks are gonna happen soon. They're starting in 5 minutes. Yeah. Let's fall out. Sorry. Yeah. No. And magicians will be here. Workshop is there. Hey guys, Pedro from Wallet Connect is presenting in the main conference right now in 5 minutes. It would be great if you can all start shuffling there, unless you're here for the magicians.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the time that you've been waiting for. We're going to sell you the entire seat, but you'll only need the edge. If you are joining the ETH Magician Circle, please make your way to the seats. Make your way to the seats. Join us in the circle. No, seriously. Join us in the circle or leave.
Well, there might be. Yeah, this is fine. But everyone can scoot in later.
Yep.
I'll scoot these guys in.
Are you ready? You can do this.
You ready to begin? Yeah.
Go for it.
Or were you about to start?
No, hi.
Okay. Hey, Andre.
Hey, Andre.
I have one quick question.
Yeah.
So, my co-founder and myself are going to DEF CON. Actually, so he submitted a talk. I forgot to put me in as a co-writer of it. So it ends up that only he has a ticket, only he has a way to get in. I can't. And I'm stuck. So I'm trying to figure out whether, yeah, exactly, who I can reach.
Email me.
Just James at Ethereum? Okay. Okay, well, you're the best man. Thank you so much.
I can't promise anything.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, hello everybody. Have a seat. You guys want to talk about Ethereum? Anyone want to talk about Ethereum?
Hey there, can I get everyone's attention? We're going to run a session in here, so either participate or make your way into some of the other rooms, please. Gentlemen? Gentlemen? Hi. Hi. If you're going to talk, either participate or move into one of the other rooms, please. Thank you.
No. You have a great voice.
What's your name?
Danielle.
Danielle would like everyone to shift down and make a tighter circle. Please.
Yeah, keep the other mic going. All right. Thank you, Boris. That was wonderful.
Yeah.
All right, so welcome to Council of Berlin 2019 Ethereum Magicians, or Fellowship of Ethereum Magicians. It's not just magicians, there's a fellowship in there. I'm Jamie, and I guess right now what I'll do is introduce the magicians for all of you who have not been up to speed or haven't come to any yet or been to the forum. And then later we'll get into a discussion And then later we'll have topics. If you guys want to work on something, it's an open format, and so we'll all look at what topics, and then we'll be dot voting on the topics over there on that whiteboard. So let me, I guess I'll talk a little bit about the history. I'm going to read it really fast so that we can get actually to business. So the Ethereum Magicians began, it was like around January 2018, and Greg Colvin and myself, we wanted to improve how Ethereum improves. And we wanted to improve the communications and the governance of it. And not just talk about it, but actually just do something about it. And so we created basically an invitation to participate. And in that invitation, we talked about what we want to do, and people came, and it was really great. We put together a couple of councils. Boris came, a lot of people came, and it was just wonderful. This big group of people started assembling, and some of the bigger contributors, Peter Pan, he got involved. That was one of the first times he got involved with Ethereum, an Ethereum event, and Maria Paula, Tomislav, and now Annette, who's joined with kind of helping organize things, because it's about taking responsibility and organizing. And that's a huge part of it. But the magicians, we like to form discussions and get work done, basically. And so when we operate, when we put together these events, that's not the main thing. It's really for all of you to talk about and put out some EIPs and make some things happen with Ethereum, coordinate. And so what we do, we self-organize. No one's in charge, so it's up to you to form groups and get things done. And all of us will work together to provide resources for that. And so in the operations ring, we form events, we run these websites and things, but those are just resources. It's up to you to actually get it done. Share ideas and work together effectively. So when Greg and I created the invitation to participate, one of the goal that we decided was to keep Ethereum the best that it can be, technically. That is at the core of what we're trying to do. The mission, to nurture community consensus. It's making decisions about that technology. No one's in charge, so people need to come together and work together to make a decision. And the work itself, producing high-quality EIPs, proposals, so that they can get accepted and implemented. Discussions and rings. Rings are how we're forming a ring right now, but as whatever thing you're interested in, form a ring around it and get some work done, put out some EIPs, make some proposals. So as we formed it, we thought of some principles, the guiding principles for the organization, or disorganization is a better way to put it. The first principle is open process. Anyone can participate, anyone can say anything. You know, we want to work together effectively, but really it's an open door. So there's no blocking you if you want to say something, if you want to organize on something. It's permissionless, right? And so if you want to form a ring or you want to have a magician's event, just do it, like in your city. Like, you don't have to ask any permission to do that. We can help you, but really there's no permission there. Individual participation. So if you're making a decision in a group, you represent yourself and your experiences. You don't represent a corporation, you don't represent a foundation, you represent your own beliefs. And so that's the individual participation principle. The third principle is taking responsibility. And we all have different skills. You know, some of us are more technical, some of us are like cryptography experts, some of us are good at organizing, communicating. Whatever it is, take responsibility for something and see it through. And in the sense of forming the standards like EIPs, taking responsibility for these standards. Like, there's someone who proposes an EIP, right? They put it together. That person doesn't own it, but there are champions. There's people who are taking responsibility for it. So that's that principle. Another principle is technical competence. That when you're in discussions that somebody, you know, each of us has our skills, and we need to understand who has the most experience and skills, and really listen to that, and not be a blowhard, essentially. That we want that the voices who have the expertise could stand out somehow. And it's not exactly a rule, but it's just something to think about, to have respect for that. And the final one is finding rough consensus. And there's a real subtlety there about rough, right? It's not voting. And it's a real subtle thing as to how you know when a group has found a decision that's going to work, right? And along with rough consensus is running code. That we don't just talk about things, we don't just create all these standards, but we actually implement them and get these standards put into clients, get them into the core devs discussions, get those EIPs out there. And if it's not core, it's not part of the core protocol, those EIPs can be relating to meta transactions, or they can relate to dApps, all kinds of things. See those things through. Create running code. Don't just create proposals. And so the final thing I'd like to say about the history or what we are as a group is who is a magician, right? And there's no definition of that, and it's really whoever wants to participate in this effort is a magician. And so, like I said, it's permissionless, and so all of us are free to talk about it. All of us are free to say we're a magician. There's no mystery about it, right? Even though magicians is kind of an ironic, it's a little bit of an ironic mystery. Like, it makes it sound mysterious. It's a lot more mysterious than it really is, right? So I think on that note, I wanted to see if anyone had any questions or wanted to say something about what I just said. If not, I'll briefly introduce the program, and then we'll move forward from there. Yeah.
If anybody can be a magician, then, sorry, I was in the middle of eating. Hi, I'm Jonathan Karras. If anybody can be a magician, then how do you ensure that the mythos of the community stays consistent? Or is it not important that it stays consistent?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of it is about kind of respecting each other and learning to, when somebody is, I guess, doing something offensive or outside of norms, to talk to them about it. And don't just let things like that happen that might mess up the culture. So I think, there's no one in charge, but it's interesting how consistency happens. And it's just a group of people who trust and know each other over time, and then the culture will develop. And so those norms are established, but there's no real enforcement process. Mm-hmm. I hope does that
It's a great
help?
answer.
Okay, good. Okay, anyone have any other questions or comments? So this council, I'll just give a very brief overview. We basically have 2 rooms to do business in at this council. We have this room, and Boris did a great job get some of these loud people out. But I hope we'll make sure to keep this room quiet as it can, so business can happen in here. We also have a room over there. We'll call this room the atrium, and that's 1036 right over there. We can use that room too. There might be some people working in there, but just grab those chairs and get started. And if people want to meet in there and work on something. And for topics, right? I'm going to really quickly read off the topics that people suggested as a way to get started, and then to let you know that later we'll vote on them using these dots. You just put a dot around the topic that you're most interested in, and then we'll see what emerges, and then we'll decide like where's a good place to have those discussions. So I'll read these off. There's business models. We have education and future of work. ProgPal is a we didn't get the primary people on ProgPal here today, but that's a very interesting topic, obviously. Constrained resource clients, ENS, that's been proposed. EIP 1962, which is I'm going to read this really fast, precompile for elliptic curve linear combinations with inclusion of pairings. I said that in one breath. Okay, so EIP 1559, which is fee market changes. Vitalik proposed this with Eric Connor. So those are 2 EIPs that are on the table. But of course, if any of you have anything you want to talk about, it doesn't have to be technical, whatever it is, we can put it on the board over there. We're going to put these stickies, and then people can vote on it. I guess we'll give you, like if somebody wants to introduce what they're going to do, as briefly as you can. So that's it for the council overview. And I think at this point, I'll turn it over to Annette to say hello and welcome us. Catch.
Okay. Hi guys. I just wanted to say quickly thank you to Jamie for opportunity to organize this council. And I tried to do my best to prepare this, and I hope that you guys will enjoy it, and I hope that you guys will get as much done as you wanted, and that the council will keep the idea and that the work will be done. And I just wanted to encourage you to speak and to talk, to have questions. And also it's being recorded, so if you guys, that you guys have to be okay that it's recorded. And I'm about to share the live stream link on Twitter, so you can watch it afterwards. And also that room over there, where it's Magician's logo on the paper, that's the workshop room for the rings. So you guys can move up to that room for the meetings. And thank you, and enjoy the council.
Thanks, Annette.
We need to thank Annette because she did so much work to organize this thing, and it's great. We're really happy that you came and helped put this together, because I don't think I could have done it without your help. So really appreciate it. So I think now we'll turn the floor over to a discussion.
Yeah, so like Jamie said, so I'm going to run a short session right now that tries to get a little interactive, talk a little bit more about magicians and how to work together, and then we'll put the topics up and actually also gather some new topics. So how many people have an account on the ETH Magicians Forum? Okay, it's not everyone. So ethereum-magicians.org is kind of the main resource that gets used. That's something that Jamie runs and that he set up originally, and that was really the gathering point that started everything. At this point, it's become the default place for long-form discussions about technical decision-making. How many people in this session consider themselves to be developers? About half, a little more. How many people have contributed to an open source project before? Again, about half. So what we're finding a lot in general is that the Ethereum Magicians Forum and the process is a way to find other people to collaborate with and really bootstrap that and have a way. What we've really also found is that it's been something that goes beyond code. So Jamie and Annette working together to organize this space and communicate it and get people into the room. That's all stuff that needs to get done, and it has spontaneously happened at many other events as well. We also have a GitHub repo. We have a bunch of other infrastructure. So that's really what the purpose of the Magicians is. Instead of everybody having to create all of these things from scratch, it's a shared space so that you can use them to do whatever else you want to organize. So whether it's talking about meta transactions, right? So this entire thing really started out as a series of discussions on ETH Magicians as well as Telegram and other places like that, right? But especially when we say things like Telegram, those sorts of messages get very quickly lost. And so in many ways, ETH Magicians keeps some of that history around. The other thing that we have is a multi-sig wallet where we accept donations. So we've gotten sponsorship and donations over the years. And there's about, I should be able to just look and know this right now, but it's not something that I look at all the time. We've got about 17,000 US dollars worth of ETH. Again, apologize that I'm not quoting this in ETH directly, to be used to pay for things like venues. And I think Jamie Magicians ended up contributing to paying for the space and the video work here, right? Yes. Right, so that's an example of something where we've taken donations that have come before. Being able to pay for tickets or other things like that shouldn't be a barrier for people to contribute. And at the same time, it means that no single individual has to put together a bunch of money up front where we've got this pool to help pay for things. The other thing that we have is 2 open collective organizations. Has anyone here heard of Open Collective? 0. Excellent. Open Collect is a really interesting project that basically, whether you're an open source project or a local community or something that's mainly a forum and some discussions like ETH Magicians is, it can have a real world entity for you. So we have 2 of them. We have one in the US and one in Europe that can actually accept credit cards and direct bank transfers so that we don't have to set up an organization. So when we say we, so I'm on the operations council, I'm one of the people who holds one of the keys to the wallet, and we try and keep things as minimum as possible. As soon as we create a Swiss foundation or a Canadian nonprofit, all of a sudden that's something that has to be managed and is very centralized. So we try and avoid that as much as possible. So Open Collective becomes another piece of our toolkit. I'm saying it's something that's there because we're happy to, if you want to do an event back home, if you want to do any particular thing, instead of having to do this from scratch, these resources are here for you to share, and you can go and you can propose and say, I'd like to do something in Bratislava, where Annette is from. And then we might be able to get consensus and say, okay, let's fund some of that so that we can fund snacks or other things like that. A lot of the challenges that we have is this: no one is in charge, so the flip side ends up becoming doing work. And I think it's only going to become more of an issue. If anyone's been involved in open source projects, it needs people more than anything else, and from people comes other things like money and resources and other things like that. I think Ethereum Magicians itself is going through a bunch of changes. It always ends up being new people. How many people have been to anything related to ETH Magicians before? Again, only about half. So if we're constantly 50% new people, each time we have to decide, well, what are we doing here? How do we do it? How do we work together? And that's an ongoing challenge where we want to find new people who want to get involved in different ways and while at the same time keeping some topics going. I think that's basically it. I wanted to really just cover a bunch of the resources that we have that are available for anyone to use. I think one of the big question marks is, you know, how does this keep going? There's discussions just kicking off on what's going to be done alongside DevCon in Osaka. Is anyone here planning to go to Osaka right now? Oh, quite a few. Awesome. So the question mark is, how the heck do we pull something off in Japan? So there's going to be a call likely right after this saying who wants to help with that. One of the things that Annette and Jamie and I talked about ahead of time is, and I'll propose that as actually one thing to discuss literally here during the day, is, hey, maybe Magicians can help people pool together and have joint accommodations in Osaka. So instead of everybody booking individual hotel rooms, could we join together and actually have the Magicians Forum be a place where people can pool together both funds and people? Is that something that's interesting to people? Show of hands. What's that? Perfect. Great. And so the question mark is, can the ETH Magicians, for instance, possibly even put some funding towards that to make that a little easier? Great. Can you make sure that gets shared, and we'll make sure to we'll put that in the notes. Awesome. Fantastic. Jamie, I think we should have each of the people who are presenting the topics probably talk about it briefly, and then we'll put it up.
Okay. So with these topics, are there people among here right now who would like to present or at least introduce a topic and facilitate a discussion about that? Because I don't. Oh, there's Kevin. So we have.
Why don't you just go through them one at a time?
Okay, just list them off. Well, business models. That's Kevin.
What do you want to talk about?
How do we make dApps that make money and can support our need to put food on the table and pay our mortgages? Business models.
Awesome.
Excellent. Education and future of work. I know that Simona wasn't able to come at this one, but is there anyone interested in facilitating that? This one? Okay. So the next one, ProgPow. That's a very interesting topic, and I think we had some people that were scheduled to make it, but they didn't make it. But if there's anyone who's interested in leading that, is there anyone wanting to facilitate that discussion? Okay, no?
We'll keep moving. We'll put them up, and then we'll see.
You'll put them up and see who's interested, yeah. Constrained resource clients.
Raspberry Pi, etc.
All right. ENS. Where did... he's not here.
Okay.
Okay.
One vote.
If you would like to, yeah, I think that would be wonderful. Okay. Another proposed topic was EIP 1962, the precompiles. These are always very interesting to talk about. Is there anyone who might want to pick that up? And lastly, the one proposed, these are all from the Excel spreadsheet where people had submitted on a form about things they're interested in. EIP 1559, which is the fee market changes. And Kane, there's Kane Warwick, and I don't see Kane here, so,
Okay.
yeah.
I will pitch one, and then I'll think about literally any topic that you want to discuss. I'll give an example. Kevin gave another great example. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring extra topics, not one but 6, just in case. So I mean, yeah. So one EIP 1930, which is about changing the opcode, the call opcodes, to have a strict gas semantic instead of the current one.
Strict gas for certain opcodes.
Yeah. Then 1102, which is about the enabling app, is still in progress. It's the one where you have this MetaMask pop-up that asks you if you want to enable that particular app, and there is improvement I would like to discuss. So if people is interested. The other one is 2224, which is allowing wallet to auto-sign without user confirmation. This could be useful for dApps. The other one, there is no EIP yet for that, but it's I call it like origin-based security to improve user experience using EIP 712. So it's like a modification of EIP 712. The other one is a potential way to optimize the estimate gas call. So it will be a modification of the client to be smarter. Currently, they have to do up to 20 calls to make sure the estimation is correct. And the last one is 1776, which is a native meta-transaction signature format, which could be extended to be more generic. So yeah, if anyone wants to talk about that. Yeah, that's all.
And your name?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, my name is Ronan Sanford. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. So, had some discussions earlier around lunch, and I wrote actually up a wiki page around grants. So I'd like to have anybody who wants to discuss grants, grant-making decision process. Can we use DAO interfaces today? Can we make grants transparent? And I'd like to propose in general that we make, that people are considering grant programs actually optimized for speed. So I think it's not very hard to give out one grant. Can we actually create processes and some tools that makes it easy to give out 50 grants in 6 months? And what would it take from both a social decision-making process and any tools that we need to accomplish that? So we'll take each of these things and we'll put them up on the board and figure out times and places. So I'm volunteering to lead that one. Any other topic proposals?
Hi everyone, I'm Sergey. I work for Consensus Diligence, a security auditor. And if somebody is interested in talking about smart contract security and how we can make Ethereum a more secure place, happy to form a ring or something like that.
Excellent. That's a great topic.
Yeah, another topic I'd like to discuss, I'm Adrian by the way, is when we consider EIPs, there is this strict agenda to have them put into hard fork. It's not the case for ERCs, and ERCs, some tend to stay in limbo for months, if not years. And like we talk about ERC 712, it's been like 2 years, it's not finalized, people are starting using it. So maybe we could, I don't know, discuss about how to solve this issue and have ERCs move forward a bit faster, or be completely dropped if no one cares about that, but not have thousands of those in limbo state.
Any others?
There is one that I had from last with Maria Paula. This one was, and I'm not sure if there's interest at this venue right now, but we were discussing integrity in the community and how to deal with people who commit infractions against us in the community. And things happen. It might be theft, there might be harassment, all kinds of different things happen, but there's no one to report this stuff to, there's no process to work out our differences. And so Maria Paula and I were thinking about how teams in a decentralized way might issue policies about behavior, and then if a team violates that can be in a semi-private way discussed, at least reported somehow. And so this ring that's forming, the integrity ring, is to think about those issues. So, any others?
Okay, shall we quickly write them down and get them voted on, and then we've already reserved basically right after this voting process of figuring out who wants to cluster on which topic. We are going to move into a business models discussion led by Kevin, so that everyone knows. So that's set already, and then we've got this space until
4, isn't it?
Okay, this space until 4, and then we've also got the separate room that people can grab whenever they need as well. Okay, so let's go and
write those
do the
down
voting.
fast and do the voting.
So everyone can get up, come over here, and start doing some voting on these topics. Four.
Also, coffee break is gonna be from 3:30 till 4. So if you guys wanna grab a coffee, that's the break for you.
You want people to just use the stickies, or do they want to use a pen?
I was thinking
different
pens.
color.
Yeah,
You can't have ones that don't have leaves.
yeah,
So
yeah, you're right. That's right. Yeah. Different set of topics. That's right. No, that's the problem. Is the lecture summit is very specific. Yeah. No, they weren't really. Yeah, that's right. No, it is definitely. Yeah, no, it's not the best situation. But we wanted to be present there because it's helping out. It'd be nice to establish this. No, of course, no. But I'm not joking. Yeah, it's a problem. No, it's not. It is a problem. It's restrictive. It's one of the things possible. Oh, ENS. Hey. Yes. Okay. Can you introduce your topic? Oh, yeah. Mr. ENS should actually. Ah, yeah, perfect. With t-shirt promotion. Sorry. It's gonna be hot. Okay.
Sorry. I'm Makoto. So what am I doing right now? Am I proposing my talk?
Introduce your talk. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
We're gonna introduce a discussion topic.
Yeah, so sorry, I just jumped in. My name is Makoto, and I'm part of ENS developers. And the talk I proposed is like currently there's many chains. Like I think there's a couple of like interchain name services like Unstoppable, Feel, and Name. I can't remember all those things. So they're thinking about ways how to basically talk to other chains. And currently, ENS has kind of basic capability, but like I think we don't have a nice kind of developer interface to let you store other chains addresses information. So I'm quite keen to know if you are anywhere working on the exchanges or wallet. I would like, and especially if you are managing multiple chain. For example, there's I think Chris from I'm Token. He's already working on like Ethereum and EOS and the Cosmos, all that stuff. So if you're working on like some other intersection of other chains, I'd like to know like what kind of requirement, what kind of interface you wish ENS to implement, so that I convince Nick to implement. That's it.
That's a great topic. Yeah. Okay. Well, we should probably describe it a little bit more over here, but yeah. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Kevin Iwaki. I am a member of the ETH Magicians Business Models Ring. We've been doing the Business Models Ring since 2017, when the business model of Ethereum dApps was ICOs, with the then ludicrous idea that there could be other ways to monetize your dApp in a Turing-complete smart contract-based blockchain application. And so over the last year and a half, we've been having these meetings at ETH Denver and other ETH Magicians councils just to talk about the evolving space of business models in Ethereum. And I would love to bring you all into the fold on that today and have a group discussion about how we put food on the table, how we pay our mortgages with dApps. And I think that there's a design space that's emerging and evolving here that's interesting to explore. So points of housekeeping. Boris, are we the guinea pigs to show people how to run a ring meeting in some way? Okay, I know that there's a template and a process, and that includes having a scribe, I think, right? So do we have any volunteers that want to just take some notes and post them in a markdown file online? Okay, thanks, Boris. The one thing I'll say while we're on the topic of notes online is that if you go to bit.ly/web3 business models, there's a 15-page document that's the output of the previous meetings about business models. So if you're looking to go 0 to 60 on the Web3 business model space, there's a document that can do that. And hopefully as the space evolves, we can keep that document updated. So that's enough, I think, of me speaking. I would love to do this as unconference style and group discussion based as possible. And so format-wise, I was thinking we would just popcorn around, and whatever business models y'all are excited about, then please just shout them out and we can have a discussion. And like Boris said, this is unconference style, so vote with your feet, vote with the discussion of the direction of the conversation with respect to where the conversation goes. And time check, it's 2:20 right now. We have until 2:40? 10, 15? Oh, so we have like an hour. Okay. All right, we'll see how it goes for the first half hour. I will start, and by way of leading by example, I will say that I am very excited by the precedent that has been set by Pool Together, which is a no-loss lottery that's built on top of Compound. And so basically the way it works with Pool Together is that you can have 100 participants that all stake 1 ETH and agree to do it for a month. I'm making up the timelines here, but basically a winner will be selected of the 100 people who put in their ETH, and the interest that was accrued over that month will go to the winner, and everyone else will get their money back. So it's a no-loss lottery that we achieve returns by pooling money and using Compound in order to generate interest, and that's a way of making profit. That's a Web3 business model that's based on top of Compound. And as someone who's interested in funding public goods, I think it's a really interesting way of funding public goods without making people give up their principle. So I will start there and say that I'm very excited about Pool Together, and I want to know what everyone else in the group is excited about. Yeah. What are we doing with mics? Are we passing them? It feels more natural to just talk, if I'm being honest, but for the live stream, maybe that doesn't work. I think we're small enough. Cool. Let's just talk like people. Well, the interest rates on Compound are like 12% on DAI, which I think is quite substantial. Is as long as they stay that high. Speak up.
She would like to use the mic.
Oh yeah. I don't know where it went. Yeah, or move in. Yeah. Here you go. Yeah, we should.
I don't want to speak, but because I couldn't hear you properly.
Oh, you would like me to use the mic? Okay, got it. All right.
Run around.
Let's just. I would prefer to have us all just speak up so that we can hear each other. But if you want us to use the mic, that's fine too. Pool together takes 10%
Of the
of the interest that's generated. Yeah. And I think that it just started a month or two ago, so I don't think that there's much precedent for that yet.
Yep.
Although compound seems
We have to.
from some VC.
Although hilarious because it's not a business model.
That's right.
We have to use mic.
Can you guys hear, or do you want us to use the mics? I hear you. Okay. Can you hear them? Kind of. All right, I'm going to go back to using the mic just because.
Yeah, and I will be running mic, so if you guys want to talk, I will be going around and with a mic, so yeah, talk.
All right. Anyone else have a comment on Pool Together?
Yeah, I think I've tried it out, it's really cool. I think it's a good model for potentially DEXs to monetize, and they could then, oh, this is too loud.
No, it's fine.
Then they could offer their traders, their users, no fees, let's say, because they're getting fees from earning that yield. There's some problems because if the collateral or the deposits in Compound are so fluid, then like how could you be assured that it's sticking in there for the required time? A new generation of DEXs that actually require you to maybe deposit first and not trade straight from your wallet, like kind of if you're going to use snarks or starks, let's say, that makes more sense because you actually have to deposit like DAI first into the smart contract, which then puts it in a Merkle tree. But it's interesting from a user point of view because would your users be fine with saying, okay, I'm okay with turning my DAI into C DAI or now R DAI, let's say, which is a cool little twist. I don't know if you've heard of R DAI, if you saw R DAI recently.
Reversible DAI?
So it's like redeem.money, but they call it R DAI. It's just like C DAI, but you could state who the interest goes to. So it splits the interest and the principal. So the interest on your C DAI doesn't go to you. You could put it to like a charity, let's say. I actually think maybe on their little web app example, Gitcoin is one example where you could send your interest to like fund a charity. Anyways, all this to say, it's a potentially, it kind of reminds me of what some of the fintech non-crypto apps do. They don't charge you trading fees on, let's say, Robinhood, because they actually lend out your assets to short sellers, let's say, or broker dealers. So they offer you free trading, but behind the scenes, your assets are actually being used by said app. So it's a potentially interesting way for dApps and DEXs to monetize.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I would add the interest-bearing stuff works really well with deposits or staking, and I think I read somewhere that was it Kickback was considering this as a business model because the business Kickback you have to stake ETH in order to use it, right?
Yeah, so I wrote a blog post a couple months ago that like during New York, that was about 2 months period, and people were staking like relatively high, I think $30 worth of ETH. But first thing is like it has to be DAI. So first thing is like we already kind of working integrated to DAI, but like once it's done, now that like whatever the staking period, if we integrate something like RDAI or something, we could potentially earn interest. So I actually calculated, and even though we had like about 18 grand at a certain point, in total it was about $45 if I calculate interest as a 10%, purely because until the very end people don't stake, and then in the last minute towards the event they just have a lots amount and it just goes like this. So that kind of changes in the blog what I wrote is like that kind of changes your mental mindset of how you architecture smart contract, because until so far I deliberately did it so that because the more amount of ETH stuck on your smart contract is a security risk. So I deliberately, and I also have some vicious something called cooling period, that if you don't withdraw within 1 week, organizer can actually steal yours, but yet 10% of people actually don't withdraw. That's how but now I'm start changing the mindset, I could, rather than just staking every time people participate to the events, I could turn the kickback like an event membership model. Like every time first time you RSVP on the kickback, you can just stake $10, so you can view all the time. That changes to the money stuck on kickback smart contract all the time. That means overall staking period gets higher. So as a dApp, I could get more interest rate if I have that in a compound, but at the same time, now I'm more exposed on the security risk. So that's kind of things I wrote. Yeah.
Cool.
A while ago, there was also discussions in a Telegram group about creating a DAO that invested, that functioned like an endowment that would take the principal and invest it in a platform like Compound and then make distributions off the interest. That project has sort of died, I think, but I think it would be an interesting experiment. There are also some KYC issues with a DAO actually entering into a lending platform, but I think there are some platforms, I don't think Compound, but that have more lax KYC requirements. So it's just an interesting thought. I agree, I like pull together.
Yeah, I just want to go back to this pool together a little bit. I think it's super interesting, but then on the other hand, is kind of fun because it has a luck element, right? I could totally see it to kind of evolve into something which is doesn't have luck involved, and perhaps the person who won the bid would be the person who offer and won the offer. And then it's basically just you build business model on top of an opportunity cost that people are willing to join this network. In a way, it does sound like a pyramid scheme in the old times.
I was just going to say on that idea of the DAO were members of the endowment. I see. Interesting. Endowment. That idea where you have a DAO that also has some sort of stated mission that you're staking on behalf of that mission, and then the interest from the stake is then used to fund grants or to pay out other bounties and such. Sounds very interesting. The part that I think, well, there's a question about how you could create there's a reputation system aspect about how those funds would be used and what proposals could be generated, but that's kind of out of scope for this. That particular thing I'm actually interested in hacking on for the hackathon as well.
Does a DAO stack have reputation built into it?
Yeah, there's this kind of concept of it's different than DAO stack, but this idea of an ethical membrane where you sort of have a virtue system that fits well with the idea of, say, an endowment with a mission. Use sort of a question of how can those funds only be used for that mission, sort of like a monastic order or something like that. It's just interesting.
I want to add that I think there might be value in using the interest to pay for a service. For instance, for meta transactions or for privacy preserving smart contracts like mixers, you always have to find someone to pay for your gas, or when you want to build like a Twitter clone on a blockchain or whatnot. Like even 10% interest for an individual might not be that much when everyone just stakes like $100, but in total you can probably bootstrap real world tools that are not busy with governing themselves, but produce value for people who might not even have a wallet.
All right. I'm going to read out a list of business models that are on the wiki, and maybe that'll serve as a little topology, a map for the discussion, and we can take it in more directions than just pooled funds. So the first category from the document is Web 2 business models that have been ported to Web 3. So subscriptions is one example of a Web 2 business model that has been ported to Web 3. Advertising is another business model that has been ported from Web 2 to Web 3, or at least could be implemented in a smart contract context. Creating a marketplace and owning the inventory and liquidity on the marketplace and taking a percentage fee on every trade is a pretty established business model in Web 2. And then the Web 3 native ones are things like ICOs, something that fundamentally exists because of blockchain and couldn't exist in the old paradigm. Building on ICOs, now there's this concept of a continuous funding model with a curved bonding type model. Staking is another primitive that can be done in Web 3. Non-fungible tokens, another model that can be done in Web 3. Inflation funding, interesting way of having a supply of tokens that increases over time, and maybe that inflation is used to fund something that wasn't funded without the inflation. Sure. I'm going to come back to that as soon as I get through the rest of the list, but that's a good question. Vitalik Buterin floated the idea of microtransactions as a way of funding wallets and clients. So he basically had the idea of adding a one-way gas fee to every transaction on the network as a norm, and then using that to fund wallet and protocol development. So microtransactions, I think, are an interesting one. And then paying with compute resources is another category. So proof of work is an example of paying with your CPU or GPU power for securing the network and then getting mining rewards. But you could see that transposed into visiting a website, and then maybe it takes a portion of your CPU instead of showing you ads with consent, maybe. And then the final one is data as labor, which was an idea that was popularized by Glenn Weil in Radical Markets. And the idea there is that when you go into LinkedIn, you upload your resume, and then they sell that to recruiters and make $30 per year per active user, which is pretty crazy. There's a fundamental idea that users should be owners of their own data and should be getting a stake of their data as if it was labor, and getting revenue for that. So that's sort of what's on the document from the Web3 business models, ETH Magician's Ring. Hopefully that can serve as sort of a topology for the discussion, and we can start going down some of these nooks and crannies, starting with NFTs. I'm one of the co-founders of Gitcoin, and we actually have an NFT marketplace for kudos. The idea is that if you do a bounty with someone and you really appreciate them, you can send them a kudos that represents something that's unique about their skill set. JavaScript Ninja, great listener, stuff like that. And the way it's a business model for us is that we, every time a new kudos is minted, it's got a price in the marketplace. And when someone wants to pay $1 in order to mint a new kudos, then the artist receives the fee for that kudos being minted, and they make $1 per kudos that they've created that's minted. And so in that respect, it's a business model, and the NFT just represents a scarce piece of artwork that you can send on the marketplace. I'm not sure if anyone from CryptoKitties is here, but they're probably the most famous, in my opinion, example of an NFT as a revenue model. Cool. Boris?
So I'd say the business model is marketplace then. Like you could.
Yeah, I would say that NFT is like a feature or a product, right? Maybe.
But I think NFT, the power is in the secondary market, but as an issuer, you can get the cut as a primary market.
So that would be a marketplace model.
Yeah, so like same for ENS, right? Like ENS has a 5 years, dollars a year fee, and after that, how it goes to secondary market, we don't benefit from that.
So your business model is subscriptions.
Ish, yeah.
I mean, I will say that there's this attribute of Web3 that involves composability, and so you can get these atomic building blocks of primitives that can be wrapped up together to create business models as if they're constructed by Lego blocks. So these categories are not mutually exclusive, and the engineer in me hates that there's no great taxonomy for this, but it's meant to stimulate discussion from this group more than it is to be an official taxonomy.
Yeah, we focus our interest on part of what you said, which is transposing Web 2 business model to Web 3, particularly platform fees and advertisement. And maybe we are the only one, but we are very much afraid that as everything is open source, if we start to put market fees or advertisement, people can just fork our platform, fork our smart contract. It's very easy to do. And the only thing we have to find that and defend our business model is to have a large network effect. And so far we don't have, because apart from CryptoKitties, most dApps don't have active users. So do you really think we can use those business model in Web3 right now?
Yeah, so defensibility is the big thing that I heard there. Are you building a business model to support a team? And for some protocol-based dApps or protocols, you're purposefully trying to not have a team in the long term. You're supposed to have the system be independent of any team, and in that sense, you don't need defensibility, in my opinion. Any comments from over here? I feel like we've been monopolizing the mic on this side of the group.
So I think there's some work in this group that was done on subscriptions. It was like there was an EIP for it. I'm just curious what happened to that, whether people are currently using it or what the current state of subscriptions is, if anybody knows.
I submitted that EIP, and I hate to keep monopolizing the speaking time because I'm sure there's lots of great points to be made back there. But EIP 1337, the LEET standard, was submitted back in 2017, early 2018, still during the ICO craze, and the idea was that subscriptions are a healthy business model in Web 2, and especially relative to ICOs. You know, if you're the founder of a dApp that has a subscription model, you know you have X users, Y churn rate, Z conversion rate, and you know what your cash flow will be in 12 months, which is pretty powerful if you think about the ups and downs that we've had in the crypto markets for the last 12 months. So EIP 1337 is a standard for doing subscriptions using meta transactions. So a good topic for Meta Cartel Demo Day. That has a reference client that you can drop into your dApp and do subscriptions. At least that was the idea. We use it for Gitcoin grants as a way of processing recurring transactions, recurring contributions to Gitcoin grants, and it's been live and in production for that. I will say that there was a working group, the elite working group, that used to hang out on the Gitcoin Slack and talk about subscriptions, but since then we've all sort of moved on to other things, and I don't think there's a good registry of people who are doing subscriptions. But it's my impression that subscriptions are a powerful business model. You know, SaaS companies arguably drove the Web 2 internet, so I think that it's something dApps could consider.
Thanks.
So summary is, code is there, users today, Gitcoin uses it.
Yep.
Go for it.
And then tell us that you did it so we can play with it.
So what it sounds like maybe to do would be, like you said, get a registry of people who are actively running subscriptions. That would be valuable. That might be a good thing to work on.
Yeah, I think so.
Anticipated, or is it like everybody using it, or is it just you guys?
I don't know without building the registry.
I'll just say we tried to integrate subscriptions into my company's like payment stack, and we weren't able to for a variety of reasons, but I'd love to talk to you more about how Gitcoin does it.
Sure.
Okay, cool. I have also, can we change topics? I have an idea for another business model that was not mentioned. So I've had this idea where I think it would be cool to create a sort of like industry coalition where for-profit, like closed source companies, come together to make a commitment in terms of like, a percentage of revenue or something like that to get, to grant to open source projects. So I used to work in big law, and they have this as like this is like a standard thing. If you're a big law firm, you have to contribute to legal aid based on some sort of percentage. Something that I think would be cool if, the closed source companies like mine figure out a way to come together to help fund some of the open source projects. So if anybody is of the same mind, I'd love to talk to you.
Great.
It's a great idea. There was an article by the Discourse team, so that makes the forum software, where they looked at the different things that they relied on, and I forget if they made a calculation exactly, but they basically parceled out and gave like thousands of dollars to different projects. I will go dig up that link and paste it as part of the notes. I think that's a really, really interesting idea, where in some ways we're talking about a business model where we have expenses of things that we pay for, and yet a bunch of the things that we all build our business on are open source dependencies that if we couldn't use them for free, we'd have to pay a lot of money for that. So the flip side of voluntarily funding things.
And then creating social pressure around it so that it becomes like an industry standard.
I think there's some like Patagonia, I think, does some sort of like eco 1% or so kind of the same thing, but for open source. Awesome. Snaps.
Make it happen.
One way of breaking this down is, Gitcoin's mission is to grow and sustain open source. We think that it's a tragedy of the commons and it's a public good where the value created doesn't match the value that can be captured. So a way that you can break this down is business models or funding models for public goods, and then business models, funding models for private for-profit dApps that have more of an excludable good type category for them. And so those are two buckets you can put these things in your brain if you're trying to grok it.
I wanted to contribute this crazy idea I had. I guess I'm trying to ideate and not be stuck on any presumptions and even things I believe are right or wrong. And I have to be careful of that. It's going to echo too much. So the idea I had was something akin to a patent, because a patent, I mean, many of us would hate patents. But if you think about what a patent is, it's the way to capture value with a time limit. And if there was a way that we could build software, even open source software, where the team captures the value and it's not open source until the team is paid for a particular release. Something like that, so that the people who created this thing can capture that value, and then it could eventually become open source. So this is the concept, but I'm not sure exactly how to position it. I'm not sure how it would be technically implemented, but I suspect, given cryptography, we could figure something out. Now that sounds like DRM, another poisonous concept many of us may hate. So just want to throw that out there. Crazy idea.
Just a quick question. I think it makes a lot of sense, but will this make an iteration process like much slower, right? If it's not open source at the beginning. I mean, I think there's like some trade-off. I don't have a solution.
I was going to say that kind of sounds like an ICO with a promise, but without giving the users anything. So you.
What do you mean by a promise? I mean, basically the software is delivered and you have to pay for it. And once the team is paid, or maybe a certain amount of time has passed, then the software would fall into open source.
Okay, so the developers have to build the product, keep it closed source, then get paid, and then open source it a few years later.
Yeah. Like per release, actually. Yeah. I was thinking of per release. So that, it's constantly being open sourced with a pipeline, but that there's value capture for the people involved in it.
I think there are some models where it's like delayed release. I'm not sure that they've been received in different ways. I'm trying to recall them, but
this was something that I saw recently. It's actually the reverse of this, where the newest, freshest version is always available as open source and is maintained and supported, and everybody gets the open source critical fixes and everything else like that. But older releases, you don't get access to, and you don't get security updates for unless you pay. And I think that's happy. I think I have the link for that, so I'll post that in the notes as well. It's kind of the it fits with the like long-term support that many enterprises, etc., need. Whereas,
yeah, that's like a penalty for conservative companies that don't want to run the latest and greatest. I really like that. Yeah. I just wanted to throw that out there. In a way, we have to keep an open mind, and we've been instructed in a way, or self-instructed, or through the community and everything else, that open source is this wonderful thing, and it is. But we have a big problem. We have to kind of keep an open mind about it, and we may have to change what it is. Like, there's no maximum. Like, the way I see it is maximizing on any property could lead to all kinds of distortions. So we have to be realistic. Like, what is the right optimal level of openness, or open, all those sorts of things. And we have the power of cryptography with us. We have, pretty cohesive community. We could probably coordinate something much better than a lot of different communities.
I was just going to ask, what if the developers don't open source it after 5 years? What do you actually do? So they've got paid on the expectation that they will, but
that's
they
true.
can just not.
I mean, the reputation would be on the line. And so, should they decide not to, they might even be in violation of a legal agreement. Like, you can actually make this, part of the license, or even have penalties slashing, things like that. There's a lot of different options to guide the behavior, but I think it's about trust. Like, once they've kind of established this pattern of, okay, it's closed, trust us. And now I don't know how this gets into whether you can see the source or not, or how do you get the right to see the source, or how do you verify the software has the properties that you hope it does? Those are big questions, and so, all of those are unanswered. But yeah, I just wanted to throw the idea out there, and it's sort of like a new wicked concept that, it stirs the passions too. A lot of people really hate it when I bring it up. I love to mention patent every time I bring it up too, because that really gets people pissed off.
There's kind of a pooled version of that is maybe mixes the collective idea with the commercial idea, or the where you have a larger like patent pool or a larger code or just copyright if you don't want to go as far as the patent. And then there's monetization for the whole pool, and anybody that contributes to it receives funds from the pool. And if you contribute to it, then you have access to using all of the source code in your projects. Sort of it's like a commons, but if you're not contributing to the commons, then you have to pay for it.
Yeah, exactly. That's another approach.
The same thing with the license that I mentioned. It was pay or contribute.
Right. There's a license called License Zero that does this kind of split from Kyle Lammeter.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Mitchell, sorry. I should know that. I worked with him. So. I don't think it was for Redis Labs.
Hello. I've seen that we talked a lot about ways of extracting the value when we transmit the information from NFTs, like all the business models that been talked before. But I still didn't see like any connections with the people that do the curadoria. It's like there's a lot of business today that basically you just trust someone to advise you, like in what to buy, in which kind of clothes to buy. And I think we're talking about like the license, but I don't see exactly how we are making. I think we have the tools to make this curadory easier and put ourselves in the process of getting paid every time this process occurs. But I don't see that we are really facilitating this. It's in any kind of business today that are doing this curadory. And I think that if we curation, because he was talking about trust, and I think like we are used to pay people for the indication for trusting them, but in software we are not there yet. In software we are like or paying before or not receiving at all. And I think like we should even like look case by case, like how to find like the best business model for that model of curadory. But we are still not in the point that we are like, okay, there's a lot of money flowing in a lot of different business that has curation, but we are not there. Even like having payments, even having unique identifications, even have like all these trust mechanisms, but we are completely away from the flow. So.
Okay. All right, it's 3 p.m. now. Jamie, you mentioned that we should be wrapping up so that we can move on to the rest of the schedule. Maybe let's give it a couple minutes for parting thoughts, if anyone has any parting thoughts.
I'm not sure when you were talking through the business models, did you mention donations? Because currently there are quite a few companies that pretty much only rely on that.
Right. I think I said micro donations is a new Web3 thing, but feel free to dive in.
I was just going to say, like, MyCrypto and Mew have worked on just pretty much donations as far as I know, and they've been pretty successful with it. I'm not sure if that's going to taper off or grow. I don't know how that's going to continue.
Right.
I think that model in many ways, especially applied to software, is essentially what we used to call shareware. And I think it's interesting to look back at some of those things which had very, very high friction, like mail me a check if you like this software. Remember, this is like, some of us were alive then. Some of us sent those checks. And I'm based in Canada, and in North America we still use checks, so theoretically we could still make that happen. But I think this is exactly really, really interesting. Is it actually goes to education and thinking about users in a different way. If we actually think of users not as customers but as collaborators, then it's more like, hey, if you like this thing that I'm building and you would like to keep using it, pay me. So I think that's something very interesting as well, is a challenge for many technical people that I think Gitcoin can in part be a platform for to help with, is like how to not suck at asking your users for money.
Sorry, I came halfway through, but did you guys discuss bonding curves as business model? You did. Damn it, I missed it.
Briefly, it was brought up, but not
Okay, because we're looking at building something with bonding curves, and it's around obviously greater attention around something, and our idea is around kind of what you were touching on actually, with like influencers is the new thing, I guess, in this generation. So every influencer has their own token. As they get more popular, obviously their token goes up in value, and then you can use that to unlock exclusive content if you subscribe to that token. But we're still like obviously fleshing it out, trying to work out whether the business model will work or not. I guess I would just want to hear from people that they know some cutting edge projects working in this space and what they've found, what works, what doesn't work, or whether we're moving on from this and bonding curves just don't work at all.
All right. So there was a call to action. If anyone knows how bonding curves are working in the wild. I know that the Commons Stack is looking to provide a platform for projects that want to fundraise to do it with continuous funding, but I don't know that they've just launched, so I don't know there's a ton of data. And there's something called Ferret. Oh, Fairmint. Can you speak to it or no? Okay.
Nexus Mutual, the smart contract insurance, I think they do use bonding curve, but that's kind of tight. Nexus Mutual, but in their case, the whole bonding curve, they have a reason to stake because they had to get a what was it, premium? So they have to take money, so that way more than you need, so that if hack happens, they have to have enough pool to pay back. So they have a reason to store a certain chunk of money. Then they use bonding curve. So they don't use bonding curve for the sake of it, but it's just they added a value added. So even though you might do bonding curve, but I think bonding curve alone, I'm not quite sure if it's a good business, but it might be good without some a game theory or whatever.
Right.
But you need to have the reason to stake before asking for bonding curve.
This is actually, hearing you talk about this makes me want to put an idea in your head, and that's bonding curves for kickback events. You said that people don't stake until the last minute. So if you can create an incentive for people to stake early by putting each event on a bonding curve. Actually, if there's an event that's about to sell out and I bought an early ticket, I might sell it to someone who wants to get in late because I took that risk of getting involved early. That might be interesting for kickback.
Frequently asked feature. Yes.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Because people tend to wait until the last minute, but if there's bonding curve, higher, last minute becomes it's high, or less kickback or something like that. I think the people have suggested often the kickback, the earlier you get in, the more kickback you get, and the last minute you already have a FOMO, so you don't need the extra incentive. So you can do kind of bonding kickback.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's on the roadmap. Okay.
Lies. I've begged Makoto and the kickback team to do staking even ahead of an event for tickets, so that it only goes ahead if you get enough people to buy tickets, and then have, I think, the addition of a bonding curve where ticket price goes up, so you pay the lowest at the beginning, and then I would love for them to do something different other than what all the other ticket things are doing. And I'm an event organizer, so I hate kickback. because I need the money to run my event.
I think
Yeah.
one issue you have is scalping, though, obviously, right? Like, you've just invented, like, super scalping.
Amazing. With 10% going to the event owner every single time and 10% to kickback.
Yeah, I suppose that.
Scalp back.
Scalp.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let's hack. Yeah.
Should we wrap it up?
I think the
Final points from anyone. 1 point per person.
I was just going to respond. The problem with scalping is just that you're creating a secondary market from which the primary actors are removed, right? So if it's actually on a bonding curve, then you're keeping the primary actors in the loop. So it's not actually scalping. It solves that problem.
Any other thoughts before we break? I'll do one closing thought. We're in the frontier of figuring this stuff out, and one of the things that gives me a lot of hope is that we've got Turing-complete smart contracts, and so there's a universe of possibility in terms of what we can program into our business models for Web3, and I really hope that we can build business models that are not extractive, that don't externalize harm to the world. I have a lot of hope that business models in Ethereum will be like Legos. There will be primitives and you can combine them, build on top of each other. And you're already starting to see that with projects like Compound and what they've enabled. So my goal as the facilitator or one of the co-facilitators of the ETH Magicians Business Models Ring is to accelerate the development of that. And the way that we do that is that we create a map, we create a topology of Web3 business models to bring new minds in the ecosystem from 0 to 60 faster. And so bit.ly/Web3 business models is the GitHub repo that points to. If you're interested in doing some writing or maintenance or just hanging out and bike shedding on Web3 business models, check that out, join the Telegram group, and let's jam async. And if not, I'll see you at DevCon at Osaka. bit.ly/Web3 business models. Yeah. Yeah.
As much as I could, and so I'll post that later today as well. So you can add other things there too.
Cool. All right, everyone. Thanks for making the space for this session. Boris, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Okay, so we should talk about the schedule for other things, other discussions. I think in here until the coffee break, we can discuss grants with Boris here. And in room 1036, we can discuss ENS. For those of you who want to go do that. In here, there's a coffee break. It will be noisy, so we're not going to do anything during that time period. But at 3:45 in 1036, the room 1036, we can discuss EIP 1776, which is native meta transactions. That's a 45-minute discussion, so that at 4:30 it could become ERC process with Hadrian. And the first one's Ronan. Is that how you pronounce your name? Ronan? Yeah. And then back in here, meanwhile, after the coffee break, smart contract security discussion. And maybe you could, we can try to corral some of the people from the after coffee to get them to come talk about it. And that's with Sergey. So, yeah, you can come over here and look at these, but I think right now, here we can begin with Boris. Boris can lead a discussion on grants, and then ENS. Who wants to go talk about ENS now? I think, does everyone want to just stay and talk about grants? I want to do both. Yeah. Yeah, well, people will migrate around. Yeah, I'll probably go check out ENS.
Yeah, stretch.
So.
More money talk.
Yeah, it's
free money talk.
It's just money.
Yeah, right.
The money's out here, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Okay, good.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for your grant stretches with me. Can I get a scribe volunteer to take notes? I will do what I can to take notes along the way and do some. I may scribble on the whiteboard as well for things. Awesome. So grants. How many people have participated in a grants process on either side? Okay, so how many people have participated on the applying for a grant? Great. You in the Decred shirt, what's your name? Can you just tell me a little bit about that process?
Sure. I'm in the maker community, so I was looking to contribute back to that community, and the foundation is nice about providing grants for people that contribute. I was doing some content and transcribing meetings. All of the work was largely up front, so the requirements were pretty straightforward. I'm working on a new grant right now, and the biggest difficulty is in the requirement finding, and usually the person that has the requirements is too busy to help you understand the requirements. Usually they can only fill out a 1 or 2 line requirement sheet, and so you have to kind of help them answer the questions that you have about that. Right now I'm building a new documentation portal for the community people in Maker that are looking to get involved. And so that's been, I was able to dive in because the framework was kind of easy to use, but then trying to get all the details of the requirements was a little bit more difficult, and is being a little bit more difficult. Not a huge grant, $1,000 or something.
So you talked about actually you did work up front for the first content that you did,
yep.
And then you got a grant kind of saying thank you for the work that you already did.
Right. And I do it in kind of a scrappy way, a hustler way, I guess, because I'm on the marketing product side, and most projects are only looking for developers so far. So that's kind of been my approach for most projects, is trying to contribute something, and then if there's a reward on the end, that's awesome. Then it allows me to contribute some more. The biggest problem I've had with the grants on the front end of like having to have the proposal and knowing exactly what the requirements are, it's very cumbersome process of getting the requirements and knowing whether or not you can actually fulfill the requirements. I'm not really a developer, but some of the tasks I can take on are developer-ish, and so it takes most of the way through that to understand whether or not I can actually deliver on the process. And so that's where I end up doing a lot of the legwork kind of in the requirement finding and the discovery of whether or not it's deliverable. Yeah.
So if you could change one thing, is there about the process, about the tooling, biggest pain?
A lot of it's, I know Kevin probably talked about it, finding ways to create project managers around open source has been difficult. They are an inherent centralization, which makes it difficult in decentralized projects. So allowing the discovery of those requirements to be a lot more upfront, but without putting all the burden on the person that wants to describe the requirements, because there's usually a bottleneck there already. So
if I summarize that, it's a little bit like there's no clarity on what needs to be done. How do you pay someone potentially to flesh out what needs to be done?
Right, and the what's the value of that there? Like, I'm not as particular about the hourly wage that I'm getting. I'm more of, okay, what's this worth to the project, and then you can pay me that amount. So it's kind of
I was going to say, I agree with all that. And Boris, I saw a tweet from you, not to put you on the spot, that had said that there's a pattern of not wanting to pay for facilitators' travel or project management or pretty much anything that's not the raw goods of whatever's being delivered. If it's a facilitation, then being here and being the charismatic guy on the mic. If it's code that's being written, it's the code being written. And there's, those are the bricks of these projects, but there's mortar that connects the bricks and makes sure it all comes together. And I think that Ethereum, for better or worse, I've found is not as interested. Well, I'm painting the ecosystem with a broad brush because it is a big ecosystem, but there are other ecosystems that are more desperate for talent that are willing to pay for those things. And so that's an observation that I've had for sure.
Fortunately, the community is very technical and product-minded, so they've been able to make that collaboration kind of happen,
Right.
but they've forced themselves into it more than willingness.
And that's Maker in particular you're talking about.
No, the ecosystem broadly of they're reluctant to pay for product management in general.
So the they here is the Ethereum they. Okay, awesome. So takeaway, I think that's another line item to even just dig into, is this like paying for the stuff around it. I'm going to riff off that a little bit, and I think I'll post this later. I had created a sort of taxonomy of different types of grants. So I'd love feedback on this, and maybe we can workshop this a little bit, which is small, one-off, project-based grants, whether it's code, not code, or whatever, which is bounded, and it's a couple of, I like to use person months. So again, we can think about what the dollars are worth or different ways, but like realistically, work needs to get done by humans who need to get compensated in some way. So the way that I think about it is person months. So small one-off projects that take 1 to 3 person months. The next is sort of medium-sized projects that take 6 to 12 person months. So again, put it underneath and say if it's 2 people, it'll be 3 to 6 months of sustained work by those people. And then there's long-term sustaining work. So I'll give it an example. If we want to improve Ethereum test nets and testing of the entire Ethereum stack, we probably need multiple people full-time for a year, if we think of that as one cycle, to work on it, so 12 person months. Does that make sense as a basis of I'd really love feedback on this.
Yes.
I don't remember exactly where I had this article that says that when we build something, we should build for what we want to accomplish and not what are the technical requirements the technical constraints that we have now. And what I see is like the EF has a lot of has some grants on the technical part, but there is all this other area where actually people are using the other apps, the centralized options, that I don't see any funding, and I don't see like any coordination, at least to know like, oh, this is the roadmap that we are, like you said, like, oh, I have this roadmap of 6 months, 12 months, but as a maker, how do I know like what you guys are building in the next 6 to 12 months? Where can I imagine, where can I fit my business model there? Like I don't have this clarity, and I don't know. I don't see this from the Ethereum side. I don't see that they are like we are talking about humans that are using products. Where are these people? Why they are not here? And I don't. For example, most part of the traffic today we found like through social, and it's transitioned to video. And so far there is no. I think status is the most close to social networking that has, but there is no alternatives to Instagram or any social. Like you have like 90% of the traffic on the internet going through those platforms, and how much of founding is going through founding alternative that will bring these people to those platforms from the I search it, like I'm not a technical guy, so I have to skip most part of those grants. But even when I ask it about those grants, like I didn't got like even like a constructive answers. Like, okay, this is not part of our roadmap right now, but I could see what you're doing, or I can't see what you're doing. Could you explain it better?
There isn't really. I mean, I think what you're asking for is trying to figure out who might fund decentralized social apps on top of Ethereum. Is that a fair question?
Yes, this is a fair
So
question.
no one is the
No
answer.
Yes.
You might pitch status, which you can actually plug things into, or you might pitch Gnosis if you build something on top of Gnosis Safe or other things like that. But what you're talking about, DApp funding, there really isn't a lot of DApp funding. I mean, that's somewhat similar to like getting a startup funded or something like that. Or I mean, Gitcoin, I would say, like if you were asking me, how do I get an Instagram? I'll just use this as an example. How do I get an Instagram clone on Ethereum funded? To me, that's no different than saying I want my startup funded.
Yes, but the question is like we are trying to find business model and people to use those things. Not only this, like the Instagram, it's an example, but are we really seeing like there are people that most part of the usage of it's completely outside of what we are founding, because that was the first thing I say. Like we are founding things like we are founding infra, but if we want to build the future, we should be aiming at the future. And I don't see this. I don't see this future of Ethereum.
I mean, I think it's hard for the EF to kind of step in and decide what the market wants, right? Like I think that's one of the reasons, infrastructure and things like that we know are necessary to make those things work, make sense. But if you're trying to, I mean, there is funding out there. There's tons of crypto hedge funds and VCs and people out there that will fund something that could potentially work. But I think it would be very concerning if the EF was trying to fund those things.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Gitcoin is a social app, but the reason it works is that our target market is developers. So if you can't figure out how to get MetaMask installed and do your first transaction, you're probably going to fail at doing a bounty for an open source project that's on Ethereum. And so I think we just kind of fell ass backwards into an audience that's technical enough, and the audience is big enough that we can have an impact. I think of this ecosystem as being like 1996 for the internet. And so if you're trying to build Facebook, you're probably too early. If you're trying to build Instagram, there's no iPhones yet, so you're probably too early. It's probably better to build something for infrastructure or for people who are servicing infrastructure at this stage, unless you've got a ton of foresight and you can just see beyond, if you can see a consumer use case before anyone else, then I think that you'll have a shot, and then you can pitch VCs or seed. There's a ton of seed capital out there that's not Ethereum specific, but you got to have the right positioning. And I don't think that like Instagram, but with Web3 is compelling enough. Like you have to know fundamentally what Web3 does for that audience, and you have to nail the timing. It's really hard. My 2 cents.
I think even more than that, and again, we're using this as an example, so don't think about this as the specific thing. Like, how would you go about getting a DApp funded? So very specifically, you might literally use Gitcoin and write in there and say, if this bounty gets $10,000 worth of ETH, we will release 1.0 that has X, Y, and Z features. That's putting all of the trust on the developers, so they get to decide when they actually take the money, right? So which is kind of the reverse of the default of Gitcoin right now. I mean, I'm essentially pitching Kickstarter, right? But the nice thing is we have programmable money, and we have some platforms like Gitcoin as one example, or ETH bounties that you could just use, including that anyone else could contribute money towards. So I don't really see a problem at the DApp layer. I'm more concerned about, like my example of how do we fund testnets for a year. So, and just to disambiguate, because we mentioned the EF and you were kind of saying how do we, there's literally no, well, Jamie works for the Ethereum Foundation, but he volunteers for ETH Magicians. There's no Ethereum Foundation decision makers. If we were in charge of the grants, they would operate very differently. So no one here can tell you what the roadmap is. And I also would love to know what the roadmap of the EF funding plan is.
So going back to what your proposal is, like I think it's a worthwhile like thesis to try and investigate or experiment with. But is the idea that it's like a sort of framework for people who are applying for grants, and then also like a rubric for people to evaluate grant applications from? Or is it?
Yes, so I think I was getting asked the same question over and over again for a bunch of different things, including people asking for detailed budgets for projects. And from my point of view, especially for code, it all comes down to people. So like the budget is people. Cool. How many months will it take? A detailed plan when you're building something that hasn't been built before, it's like, I think I can get this done in 3 months, and you're probably not going to get much better than that. So I would like anybody who is proposing to do a new grant system, instead of starting from scratch, maybe work together on doing these things. And then the other thing that I just started thinking about is, can we actually hold grant-making organizations accountable and say, we ask for transparency in these areas, and this is roughly how it should work. So ideally, it should be benefit of both people applying for grants. So there's a segment of things like, cool, I'll do a month of work, and then I get paid within 2 weeks. If you're going to pay me, might be like a useful thing to do, other things like that. So thank you for the question.
My pleasure.
I'd like to ask a question. I haven't been working with grants at all, and the question is, currently in this room, how many organizations are actually giving grants, and how are they operated? Is there any decentralized way, like decentralized organizations that are giving grants, or is it just Ethereum Foundation with their centralized decision mostly? What is the current state of it?
I would check out Moloch DAO. I think that they have $2 million of capital under management, but it's just for protocol level stuff right now. No, it's for anything?
I have zero idea of how much money they've given out.
Right.
What their process is.
Yeah, the process is documented on their very poor website. But they have a lot of money. I actually just got my first Moloch DAO grant last week, so yeah.
Do you know of a longer list somewhere of granting organization? I feel like this must have been.
Yeah, I bet if Eric Connor was here, he'd tell us it's on ETHub. The thing that comes to mind for me, though, is you can click through each of these websites and submit grant proposals for each website, but it'd almost be useful to have a Commons app for grant funding, so that you as so you don't have to submit it to everyone. I mean, there's a reason why this exists in college admissions, right? I'm going to trigger Boris, and we're never going to give him the mic.
Go ahead. I can rant later.
Yeah, I was just going to say there's a lot of talk about funding like protocol and infrastructure, but we don't know what infrastructure or protocols to build until people try building things and run into blocks, and then so they try and build this great app, but then they get stuck because of the infrastructure. Then you improve the infrastructure, then you build a better dApp, then you build better infrastructure. I don't think you can just do one on its own and then build the other on top. You've got to build one, see what it needs, then build that.
Sure. I think there's a piece there where we can either, I'm thinking more fundamentally. So who's working on the next hard fork?
A few people? Like
Who are they paid by? What if they stop getting paid? So I think there's a piece of really low-level infrastructure that there's this whole other level of who decides as well. So both what and in what order and priority and other things like that. And in many ways, I'm looking ahead to saying, I have no control over the Ethereum Foundation. Tomorrow, they could decide to close up shop. And then we're going to be in trouble. So we should probably start tuning our muscles around funding things in a tragedy of the commons situation. So if you're a dApp builder, My question is, how much time do you spend working on core Ethereum? And if the answer is 0, then we're all going to be in a world of hurt. And that's kind of the situation with state rent right now. Everyone's kind of waiting for someone to solve some problems.
Yeah, I agree, but you're saying if they stopped funding, but they haven't stopped funding, they are funding it. It might not be perfect or ideal, and it definitely could use a lot of improvement, but there isn't much dApp funding at all. So the infrastructure underneath is getting a lot of attention, but the dApps aren't, as far as I'm aware.
I'm surprised to hear that because there's some like CB Insights just released their quarterly report, and there's so much venture capital funding going into public blockchains, and it's going to like private companies like mine. So I'm surprised to hear that there's like a sense of a lack of funding for our applications.
I think most of the money that's in VC is going into first layer. It's not going into second layer.
That is extremely surprising.
I would say that like second layer applications should not be that granted, because all of them should earn money eventually. Like if you want to build Instagram on blockchain, you should earn money eventually. So you need investment. You don't need grants, which are just like more like charity. But some infrastructural projects which are not gonna earn money, they do need grants, and that's why you need to like switch focus for that mostly. And currently, people are actually building decentralized ways how to fund. For example, one of projects close to me called Penvala, they are building like decentralized version of Ethereum Foundation. So anyone on Ethereum can kind of invest there just to help Ethereum ecosystem, because we all earn money from it, and people can give back to like this like smart contracts or decentralized organizations, and they will give back grants eventually.
So it's good to mention Penvala, and whether it's on ETHUB or not, I'll make sure that I get, as part of the notes from this, a list of granting organizations up. Penvala doesn't fund people. They give you Penvala tokens that may or may not be worth something in the future, which again doesn't solve the I need money to eat up front. It actually is, because I've talked to them at length and have said, and they told me they might be something worth something next year.
Yeah, they are launching like right now, and yeah, they do give you tokens which are tradable from the start. So so the idea is that people are donating actual money to that, so they actually buy these tokens. And when they do, like there is a market, like it would be like Uniswap or some other market that where you can actually buy or sell these tokens. So when project gets funded, they can just do it. But yeah, only like if initial phase would be successful and tokens will be actually tradable and you can actually sell them. But
you know what that sounds like?
That sounds like you need initial investors who can actually do it initially. Yes.
Sounds like a scary ICO where your fate is in your own hands.
Yeah.
I want to very briefly talk about a feature of Gitcoin grants that I've wanted to build in for a long time. Has anyone heard of dominance assurance contracts? So there's this game theoretic primitive called an assurance contract, where it solves the categorical imperative of funding public goods, which is that everyone wants to fund public goods that they'll be able to benefit from, but no one wants to be the only sucker that did it. So if I'm going to put in 1 ETH to, I don't know, what would be a public good? Buy us all lunch, but no one else did, then I'm the one who's bearing the load. And so there's this thing called the assurance contract, which basically says, okay, we're going to set a funding goal of 10 ETH, and I'll stake my 1 ETH, but it'll only get withdrawn from my wallet if we reach the funding goal. It's enforced in a smart contract. That's an assurance contract. And so there's this other Kickstarter. So, but that's the building block. And then what I really am excited about is dominance assurance contracts, which basically says, I want to organize lunch for this group. I'm going to put in my 1 ETH stake. to kick it off, and I want everyone else in here to put money in the pot. And when we get lunch, when we actually cross the funding threshold, then I get my money back or some percentage of the whole pot in exchange for organizing, for cat herding the grant to get across the finish line. So it's this game theoretic primitive that not only solves the problem, the risk of putting in money, but also solves the problem of who's organizing the project manager issue. And so there's been a lot of people talking about this at Radical Markets and in different ways, and I hope I want to build it into Gitcoin grants, but there's a whole long story about why that's not prioritized. I'm giving it out for free to anyone else who's worrying about grants to please build it.
So the reason why I actually wanted to participate today was because of EIP 1559, which has, I think, like $100,000 to $150,000 cost to implement it. And it seems like that's one of the issues that we have at the moment is like there's a spec, people want it, as a person who's running a DApp, it's like one of the most critical things we could do. But there's no one actually cat herding it, right? Like it's just kind of floating around. And I think that if there was a mechanism like that, that someone could say, okay, I'll seed it, I'll push for it, that type of thing that's like to your point around, person months, right? It's like a 3-person month thing. It's like a little too big for people to just kind of go, okay, let's do it tomorrow, So when will you have that available?
So with 1559, as far as I know, Rick Dudley is the working group lead and is fully funded by the EF to work on it.
Okay. Because it got dropped from the hard fork, so it doesn't seem like anyone's assigned to actually build it right now. I haven't talked to Rick about it yet. I've talked to Eric, but
as far as I know, Rick is the working group lead and should be transparent about what he has delivered and what else needs to be done with it.
Okay. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So and I think that's the challenge. So the working group model was Alexei, after a core devs meeting that we had here in Berlin, proposed to the EF to fund some working groups. And so some leads got assigned and some money to begin to do planning and research got done, but we're once again, it only got funded for got funded for 3 months.
Right. Okay. So we need more funding.
So probably you need something like from now until the next hard fork.
Yeah.
So how do we raise 12 person months of funding to get 1559 in?
That's a good question.
Yeah. Should we use a dominance insurance contract to fund building a dominance assurance contract functionality?
I'll just fund it if someone wants to build it. So I'll put up a bounty for it. But with respect to EIP 1559, I think submit a proposal to Molokdal. I think you'll be...
So Amin was talking about it, but they don't have enough money apparently to fund the entire build out of it, he was saying. It's too big of a thing to fund, like 150 grand. I don't know. I haven't talked to Amin about it yet. I literally have been trying to work out what's the deal, so...
Yeah. That'll solve all our problems for 6 months.
No, it was funded for 3 months.
Go for it.
Okay, so who is controlling which grant goes to Gitcoin? Because I saw some inappropriate grant that was posted on a website. So that's a question probably for you.
Who controls what grants go to Gitcoin?
Like which grants are gonna get funded or are gonna be posted?
Oh, you mean on Gitcoin grants? Yeah. So if you go to gitcoin.co/grants, you can submit an application to put a grant up, and that's how like that's how the process works. But we decide internally which ones we're going to host. Our focus is on open source and specifically like commons and public funding stuff. So sometimes we don't post things that are more private centric.
And is there a way that you guys are controlling, like if the grant was used the right way or no?
So we have this mechanism called CLR, which is going to be hard to explain concisely in an increasingly loud room, but it's quadratic funding. The crowd decides what gets funded with the matching pool. Unfortunately, we haven't scaled it up very much. We're going to do CLR round 3 of 50K-ish this quarter, which is like decent money, but it's not, fund EIP 1559 money. Part of the problem for us is that with Consensus changing its model, we're now focused on becoming a business that can stay afloat via a business model. And we built Gitcoin grants in the bull market before that was a consideration for us. And it's just very hard for us to focus on it, keep on scaling it, getting it as big as Moloch DAO, getting it big enough to make an impact when there's no business model for us. And so I guess that's a way of saying that we sort of deprioritized grants relative to our core business of hackathons, and that's why you're seeing it not get as big. It's getting loud in here, Boris. What do you think?
So I will post the notes that we have and links for this also to the ETH Magicians Forum. There's a bunch more things. I know a bunch of people, aside from the actual like money and size, there is the like who decides and how do you prioritize, which is an incredible area as well. DAO Stack is really interesting, and I'd love for people to even just experiment with some of that. So I'll post a bunch of things, and we'll see you on the forums for other questions.
Also, schedule of Magicians meeting is tweeted. It's on Twitter, and yeah, you can find it on ETH Magicians Twitter account. There's basically Twitter thread on the schedule. Yep, that's all. Thank you so much. Enjoy coffee break. Yay. Thank you. Yeah, awesome.
alcohol. Are you okay?
Yeah, I know. I'm just busy. Like, hello. Hey guys. So talks will begin in about 5 to 10 minutes. Yeah, like so. This was just a break. Catch a quick bite, right? And we have in the main conference we have Yoav Weiss from Tabuki demoing something special with MakerDAO and the gas station network, right? And that's going to be the launch of something completely new. So that's first peek, right? And after as well in the workshop room we have a workshop, by Open Zeppelin, right, on gas station network. So yeah, love to get everyone back into the rooms in about 5 to 10 minutes, which means now, right? Yeah.
Hi. Hi, if you're interested in doing the meta transactions workshop right now to see how you can implement meta transactions right now, like today in production, we're going to start in about 1 minute in this room right here. So if you want to join, come now or forever lose your meta transactions.
trying to figure out how to
You
tell
mean-
these people. I'm trying to decide if we should bring it to Okay, we have a couple of guys who can have the discussion if you would like. So I'll announce it too, and we can probably get a little ring going. Yeah, well, you should go into the room because it's much quieter in the room. Yeah. Okay. So these guys are the ones to coordinate with. I'll announce it in here and get people to go. So.
Okay, so which room exactly?
It's 1036, right through the. Right through the door, yeah. There's some people working in there, and just tell them we're going to get started. And there's your circles in there.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, yeah, just grab these guys and do it, yeah. And then I'll announce. Okay. I have to channel my inner Boris.
Hi guys. I don't want to interrupt you during coffee break. Okay, I'm going to start talking and then we will.
Why don't you announce it? No, I'll do it. Okay.
You want it?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Okay, because I was about to tell something like, I don't want to interrupt your conversation, but there's going to be.
But we're going to interrupt your conversation anyway. No one's going to listen anyway.
Okay.
They're going to keep talking. But maybe somebody's paying attention. So.
Let's talk on the microphone.
Okay, let's do it. You go first, and then I'll kick in with Boris.
Seriously, I have to start? Okay.
Well, you tell them to interrupt. Sorry to interrupt your coffee.
Okay. Hey guys, so sorry for interrupting your coffee break, but we just want to announce you something.
Yes, so if anybody's interested in smart contract security, we're going to have a conversation about it with the magicians, led by Sergey here, and it's right in the room past that arch, and that is room 1036. So anyone who is interested in smart contract security, we'll have a conversation about it, and it's going to get technical. It'll be very interesting. So do it.
Let's go.
I don't think people are going.
No, let's go. We are going to make people go.
Are you going?
The first entry is which app is the thing. Then,
Yep. Cool. Let's go there. Just go there. Go there. Yep, smart contract security is happening in that room. Can you see the open doors? Yep, go there.